Hi, I'm Jim Gardner and welcome to Art Painting 101, my YouTube channel. Today we're going to do a quick exercise in painting loose. And what that will be, the subject is the Cape in snow. That's Cape Cod. And this is not meant as a masterpiece, just a way to learn some brush strokes and techniques and end up with a painting that you can share. Thank you. For this demonstration, we will use this photo of Cape Cod in the snow, taken by Paula Carlson, who allowed us its use as a reference. It was chosen for its strong shapes, rich darks, bright light colors, and interesting shadows. Even though it is a wonderful capture, we want a simpler subject for a simple loose painting. To capture this foreground would require many details, so it was cropped to this, a 2x3 format, which will fit nicely on a 12x18 canvas board or paper. In order to simplify the drawing process, I like to block out some very simple shapes, like these shown here in the photograph. You can even draw these lines in a light pencil on your canvas before you start your drawing to help you frame it out. The canvas was painted a mid-tone tan gray to cover the stark white. This makes it easier to judge how light or dark our colors are. This is what artists call values. A number 10 pencil was used, and you can see the drawing is very simple, just placing shapes in the frame. There are no details, and the reference was only glanced at while sketching this in. If the drawing is too detailed, it will often cause us to paint inside the lines rather than paint freely and loosely. I start with the sky in most landscapes. I will mix a small amount of dark blue with a slightly larger pile of mid blue until well blended. I used Ultramarine Blue and Cerulean, but Cobalt Blue will work also. Then add a larger amount of titanium white at the bottom. The paint pile shown is not fully mixed. The blue at the top is too dark. I left it so you can see the starting color. It does show how we want to mix it, gradually from almost pure white to a light medium blue. Don't be stingy with paint. Better to have too much than not enough, as we will need 2 coats. Working with a large brush, lightly dampened, like a number 8 filbert or flat, start with the dark color at the top and work quickly. Paint horizontally in 1-inch increments, downward, lightly dragging some paint into the previous band. We are picking up paints from the pile, first dark, then 2 or 3 midtones, finally almost white. Gently wipe your brush with a paper towel between shades so you don't draw the previous color into the lighter areas. We want decent coverage, but we are doing at least 1 more coat, probably 2, so don't fuss, but be certain to carry the paint past the drawing line for the trees so as not to leave an unpainted area for later. Do not go back and touch up a previous band. You will only drag paint off the canvas and create a different color, which will be worse. Time now to lightly mist with a spray bottle filled with distilled water the paint pile on our palette. Use a hairdryer set to low heat, high fan, to thoroughly dry the painted area of the canvas. Now repeat the process for a second coat. Spritz gently with more mist if your paint is tacky. It should flow off your brush very easily. You can see from the photo the sky is darker at the top, but overall it is still a very light blue. Remember, it is easier to darken sky colors rather than lighten them. I have a little leftover light blue, and I mark out the shadows on the beach, but this step is not necessary. I mix the color for the seawater and paint it in. Here is a guide to the mixture. These are not recipes. It's not 2 tablespoons sugar to a half teaspoon of salt. You do not need to use these colors. We just want a mid-range gray blue. The color is really not that important. Clean up, take a short break, and then we will paint in the tree line. When I started this, my idea was to use only slides and narration to create this exercise. It became apparent that it would be difficult for most beginners to understand the concept used in painting the trees, so I created another panel for demonstration. Sorry if my hand blocked some of the mixing and painting during this upcoming section. When it comes to filming, I am an ultra beginner. Again, we are going to use a paint pile technique. In the center, we want a fairly dark muted green. I used Chromium Green. If you have a permanent light green, add a tiny amount of red, it will darken and mute. Around the center, we will put out a small amount of black, dark blue, yellow ochre, dark red, white, and maybe a deep gray, which you can mix yourself. Using a number 6 flat or filbert brush, dip into the green, draw a small amount of the blue, and mix a dark blue green. If need be, tap the black pile to darken, but be very careful, a drop of black goes a long way. Mix these colors loosely. We are not trying to create a single smooth color. Once I get a dark enough color, notice I add a tiny amount of white to gray out the color. As you can see, start at the far trees. The added blue will cause the color to recede, creating distance. We want to use short, erratic strokes and not be too concerned with coverage. If some of the underlying color shows through, it will create highlights. We just want to paint the overall shape, not worry about branches or leaves. Do not paint from the reference. You can glance at it, but do not try and recreate it. The film is not sped up. The brushwork is very rapid, and we are simply making the overall shape. As we move closer to the foreground or left, add more greens, and eventually a small amount of yellow ochre to create a warmer green, but keep the color fairly dark. Paint one of the forward trees a slightly darker color, using a dabbing technique to create edges against the sky and the tree previously. You can see this first coat takes barely 6 minutes. Mist your palette and dry the first coat with a hairdryer. I add more paint to the palette, having used the black and blue in the previous section. We want to remix some similar colors, but slightly lighter or more yellow, but still very close to your first coat, and repeat the process this time using a number 4 flat brush. Again, the strokes are erratic. We are not trying to get complete coverage, but a series of unrelated short brush strokes in multiple directions over the top of the darker color, allowing it to show through randomly. Keep changing the mixture as you move to the left. With each color, I am trying to create a very loose Christmas tree or rounded pine tree edge. You really can't do this wrong. The variation in the colors will create visual texture. That ends the demonstration video portion, and in the next slide, we will return to the original painting. Here is the painting after completing the second coat. As you can see in the close-up, it appears as branches. If we painted this tree line one dark green color, the painting would still work, so don't get overly concerned with this technique. If you can't manage it, just paint it all dark green. Take a small amount of the blue or green we started the tree line with and add a tiny bit of yellow ochre and a drop of white to create a light gray-green. Add the strip of land above the water. This lighter color will read as distance. I just used the number 4 brush held sideways, being certain to keep a straight horizon edge. I'm not certain when I added the rock, but if you have not done so, do it now. You can also add the 3 houses to the strip of land in the background. I simply touched it lightly with a number 4 brush dipped in light gray and drew it down a tiny bit, then repeated the process with a darker gray to create the roof. This step, while fun, is unimportant to the overall painting. Mix a light, warm, neutral gray. This will be how we delineate the deciduous trees. Simply paint in the dormant tree shapes. Drag the brush lightly so that the sky color still shows through. That'll give the appearance that they are branches. Then we will mix a cool gray blue. Again, the exact color is not that important. We just need a strong dark blue or mid-violet to signify shade. Now paint in whatever we have drawn as shadow. Again, don't fuss. Don't worry about the edges or small mistakes. This is not the finished product. We now have finished the block-in process and have the bones of our painting. I take a picture of this stage and open it side by side in Windows with the cropped reference photo, so I can easily compare the two. I am not trying to copy the photo, I am looking for things that bother me. First off, notice that the sky is not blue enough. Second, the shadows in the front left snow area come from an area blocked by my trees, which is easy to correct. I check to be sure my horizon is good, and it is. Finally, where the purple arrows are, the sun is entering through the tree line at an area of deciduous trees. But I don't want to paint them. They are difficult to render well and not really important. So I make a decision to notch the tree line when I add blue to the sky. The important thing is to learn to adjust paintings as you go, especially as a beginner. Again, mix a graduated darker blue for the sky, just like we did before, and paint it in going from dark to light. Notice I make a small notch in the tree line to create an obvious place that the sun is coming through on the ground. There is no wrong way to do this. It can even be omitted. We now mix a blue-gray for the tree shadows and a white with a little bit of light blue-gray for the snow areas. Now referring more often to the reference, paint in the shadows as best you can. The next step is painting in the snow. When painting both the shadows and the snow, make your brush strokes horizontally, as this will reinforce the sunlight direction. Notice when painting the snow, I correct the left edge of the tree line to allow a place where light can enter and make sense for the shadows on the ground. I put a small amount of yellow ochre on my fingertip and dab it on the tree edge in the opening, wiping it off quickly to give the effect of light coming from behind. Mix a small amount of yellow ochre with a brown, but don't mix it thoroughly. Dip the corner of a fan brush into the color and use the brush to stroke up and down on edge rather than flatly to create the grass areas. And we are now complete. Here's the finished painting. This was an exercise, and I hope you learned some new techniques. Remember, have fun, keep painting, just enjoy the journey.